Hey y'all. Welcome to another episode of my so-called disabled life with the man Maui Daster. Hey. Depending on when I post this, we will have exited the blizzard snowpocalypse that has been going on in New York for ow, forever apparently. Last month we had about 10 inches of snow. Today apparently we can get up to 23 whole inches. And it's just like, why do folks keep acting like it doesn't snow in New York? Like, come on, y'all. We why do we only have like a few of those melting bucket truck things? Like, we need more of that. Anyway, it's here. We're inside. We're nice and cozy. But it was a little too cozy earlier. It was very hot in my apartment, and now I'm a little nippy because I opened the window. But I digress. Um, so today I have a wonderful another international interview, which I'm very very excited about, with Andrea Johnson, and she was recently diagnosed with autism and has been rediscovering herself and her life through new diagnoses, and recognizing that she was going through all these things for so long, didn't have the words for it, and now she's got the words for it, and now it's a whole new adventure of finding out her disabled identity. And so I'm so excited to bring her on and so excited to chat.
Thank you.
Hello.
I'm delighted and thrilled that you've asked me to join you today and to share my experiences.
Absolutely. I am so excited to have you as well. So I start
Good.
off every episode asking just general questions, but they're like deeper than just general questions because sometimes they open up a whole new box of like, wow, I never thought about that. So who is Andrea and why do you do what you do?
Okay, so I've spent most of my career working in inclusion and the public sector, long before it became a mainstream conversation. And early on, I was trained in carrying out race impact assessments, and that was following the Macpherson report. That was published after the murder of Stephen Lawrence and the subsequent inquiry into institutional racism in the Metropolitan Police. And that report highlighted how systemic failures, not just individual prejudice, how that can persist in society. And that experience early on in my career taught me that inequality isn't just random, it's often built into systems, and without structured intention, and good intentions alone just aren't enough. And then later, I led Equality Northeast, and I worked across multiple sectors. So organisations with great intentions, good intentions, whose processes still excluded people. And that tension between intention and structure has really started to shape my perspective ever since. And as you referred to just earlier, I was diagnosed at 56 as autistic. So that's just 18 months ago. And it's helped me to understand more about why I notice patterns, particularly where systems advantage some and disadvantage others. And it's also explained some of the personal challenges that I've had navigating environments not designed for minds like mine. And last year, I had almost a catastrophic burnout and shutdown. My nervous system just couldn't sustain the way I was working. And that was pivotal in forcing me to pause and really rethink not just about my health, but how work itself is structured. And that's led me to begin the journey of founding Accelerate Inclusion. And I'm redesigning that work to be sustainable for me, and also the organisations that I support. And that's how exploring how ethical AI can create inclusive systems with proper human oversight. Because for me, inclusion isn't just a statement or a tick boxing exercise. It's about designing systems where people can do the best work without harming themselves. And strong systems create strong humans and they reinforce each other.
Oh my gosh, you just dropped so many gems. Like, I just love everything you just said because oftentimes when I mean, and I maybe some people do it on purpose, but maybe some folks don't. They don't understand that some of these things are very set in the systems to be that way on purpose
Yeah.
because they want certain people oppressed and used by the system. And so I really find that so interesting that because of the way your brain works, you were able to dissect that and look into that and then start an organization around doing that and supporting other people through that. So that is so snap. I love that so much. So when you were diagnosed just 18 months ago, like I remember when I was sick for a while as a child, and then was diagnosed with lupus after, oh gosh, 6 years of being very ill, losing weight, not being able to eat or sleep, like having chest pain. So what was it like after all these years of no, going through all this stuff and then getting this diagnosis and then the after effects with it?
It's been a roller coaster of emotions, I have to say, and there's been some highs and there's been some lows, and I specifically went into exploring the diagnosis because my both my adult children are autistic, ADHD, dyspraxia, OCD. We've got a very rich mix of neurodivergence in the family, and I was supporting my son through a very difficult time in his professional life, and came across lots of research and information about hereditary aspects of autism, and the sort of things that women and girls sort of that the traits that are overlooked and are missed. And I kind of started to have light bulb moments thinking, hmm, that explains what I used to do when I was, say, 10-year-old, and maybe that's why I had that challenge. And I wanted to particularly show both of my children that with the right environment that you could thrive, because I've been very fortunate throughout my career to work in some wonderful organizations that actually played to my strengths. Not that there hasn't been challenges throughout my career, because there has, and in every single role that I've had challenges which I now know are linked to the way that I think and the way I communicate. um, but yeah, it started off with that light bulb moment, and then it kind of almost followed the grief cycle, because some of the things and the situations that I found myself in over the years, um, maybe I would have done things differently, or maybe I would have avoided situations, or even people, if I'd known things about myself, because I've had a very interesting and varied career over the years, and yeah, I think it's still something that's evolving, and I think it's something that's quite common for late diagnosed autistic people to go through this roller coaster. I wouldn't want to have it any other way. I've always known I was different, and there's just a label for it now. But yeah, it started out as yes, you can do that, you can thrive in the right environment, but it also coexisted, and it sort of happened at the same time as the age thing for women of a certain age going through menopause, and a lot of other things that were going on personally, health wise, seemed to amplify the traits, and it just it kind of almost snowballed at the same time, and I almost felt more autistic at the time once I got my diagnosis, because I started to drop the mask, and yes, it was an interesting time. I kind of went away originally of being coming out loud and proud as autistic, giving sort of talks internally to staff groups and telling them about my journey, to feeling very self-conscious and aware of how people were looking at me and reacting to me. Yeah, so it was a mixed bag. But yeah, it's an evolving sort of piece, really.
I think that's beautiful though that you came into your diagnosis, you found the words for it, and sort of like that vindication, because you felt it in your body, you knew, and then you got the vindication, and it's like, okay, now I'm here. How do I function and deal in this? So what's it like? You said you have your two kids who already had their diagnoses. What was it like being a parent while you were dealing with all this stuff with no diagnosis, but having your children who do, and you have to like raise them?
Yeah, I mean, challenging, very challenging. But for me, now that I know literally that the whole of my family line has neurodivergence all the way through it, I didn't know anything different. So I just thought life was challenging for for most people. Um, and my both my children have had very different experiences. My daughter Catherine, she very early on she had developmental language delay, and we kind of got into the medical system trying to understand what was happening, why her speech wasn't developing. And at the same time, my sisters were going through similar things. One of my sisters was going through a diagnostic process for my nephew, and he was diagnosed at three and a half as being autistic. Now, my daughter Catherine presented very, very differently to my nephew. And we're going back 25 years ago now. And so we were seeing the same consultant who was asking exactly the same things. And I'm thinking, Catherine can't be autistic. She's nothing like Danny. And it was really, really sort of hard for me to understand why I was being asked these questions. But I'm a gobby mother. I'm like a lioness, and if I think there's something not being done right for my kids, I'm the first to jump in line, and I just kept persisting with that, and eventually the consultant around the autism piece couldn't conclusively diagnose Catherine as being autistic and discharged, and so we were left with a 10-year-old thinking there's still something that she's finding difficult, and we're not getting the answers. So, just by a chance encounter with someone at a friend's party, their son had been diagnosed with dyspraxia, and this woman was telling me all about the things that her son at 10-year-old was doing, and I'm thinking, Catherine does that, Catherine does that. And I did a lot of research around dyspraxia, and that's when the penny started to drop that it was potentially dyspraxia and not autism. And so I asked for a re-referral into the medical process, and we got seen quite quickly, and literally within 5 minutes the consultant literally got Catherine to hop on the medical bench, tapped her knees with the hammer, asked her to put a piece of paper up to her eye like a little pirate, and then did some various things with balance and things like that. And she went, "Yeah, she's got dyspraxia." And it was like, whoa. And that enabled us to understand some of the problems that Catherine was having around her her learning style. And she was really struggling. The language delay had really interrupted her journey through school, and we were able to have a repeat nursery, and then the first reception year. So she was two school academic years behind her peers at this point. But having that diagnosis enabled us to get some support in place in the school environment, and that was really helpful. She had an amazing helper, a lovely woman called Mrs. Spottiswood, and she just she almost treated her like her own child, her own granddaughter, and she really encouraged Catherine. And Catherine had gone from being 4 year old. I'm being taught literally that this young person, this little tiny individual, wouldn't be academically inclined, wouldn't be able to do the SATs that we have in the UK, wouldn't be able to do the GCSE that they do at the end of the high school, wouldn't be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I was told at the time, I've got a long journey ahead and lots of challenges with a child that will never academically achieve anything. And I literally, there's no way that you're going to write off a child, a 3, 4 year old. And so I spent a lot of time with my daughter, teaching her to read, and over those years while we were going through that diagnostic process, she started to develop, and just excel. And when it came to when she was 10 and we got the diagnosis, she was in what year 4, so she'll have been 11 year old. She would have been in the year group where they transition from primary education to secondary education in the UK. And a chance conversation with the head teacher said, "You do realise, Mrs. Johnson, that she's 2 years academically behind her peers, and if she can continue to do that throughout a whole academic career, and she can leave school at 16 legally without having taken any examinations." And I went, "Oh, well, that's not going to happen then." So we worked on a transition phase, and despite all the challenges that she had faced, she transitioned, and she went from being in year 3 to year 5, literally within 6 weeks. And it's always been a bit of a standing joke because Catherine, from being told at such an early age she wouldn't amount to anything, ended up with 2 4s and a 5 in a SATs at age 11. At the end of her secondary school education, she had 11 or 12 GCSEs, all good grades. And at the end of her college education, she had a triple distinction star in childhood development. She went on to university, did a joint honours degree, got first class joint honours degree in disability studies and development, and then went on and studied to become a primary school teacher and got a first class distinction in that. And that's just the power of determination of a young person to go through the whole of you know keep coming against challenges and keep pushing through. And my son's journey has been completely different because Christopher, um, he was always the quiet, studious young person, very articulate, was never any bother in the classes, and so he fell through the cracks. So he didn't have a diagnosis for the challenges he faced, and he went off to university. And once he got into that environment when he was 21, 22, he really started to struggle. And that's when we discovered that he had dyspraxia. And then a year later, he was diagnosed as autistic. And had he had the correct accommodations in university at the time, he would have probably been able to sustain that. Sadly, he left university without completing his studies because that environment just wasn't the right place for him at the right time. So yes, they both had very different journeys, but that sort of sense of disabled sort of joy, and as a mother, seeing what they've been able to achieve, it is amazing. And I think for any parent to see their children struggle, it is a challenge. Um, but also when they have their moments of joy and success, that also gives that pure raw emotion of wow, look what they've achieved. And Christopher at the moment, he runs a YouTube channel called Davy J, and he reviews retro PlayStation games. It's not the kind of thing that I watch very frequently. There's a lot of adult humour and adult language in there, but a lot of people enjoy watching him. And he's got his own novel. He's wrote an amazing science fiction novel called Spiritum, which he's going to release soon. And my daughter, she's left the teaching profession, but she now works and supports unemployed people to find meaningful employment. So watching them shine in their own ways really reminds me of what I do. And that's about really, it's about helping systems and and people um, to recognize and nurture that talent where there's difference, because there's so much creativity in innovation in neurodivergent children and adults, and seeing that celebrated is so rewarding.
No, I love that so much. And I love the picture that you painted of like your kids were struggling, but once they found those supports and got to the places where they could like actually have their talent shine, then the sky was literally the limit, like because they could do. And I think that sometimes people forget about that. They one think, oh, you need a lot of different supports and a lot of different help, and not everybody does. But even the people who do, when they do get those supports and get those helps, they can succeed in so many different things. And sometimes it just makes
Absolutely.
you wonder why we can't support more people. Like it's not a heavy lift to support people to live their lives and do things. So I think that's very
Yeah.
beautiful.
And I think one of the challenges that we find, and I think this is something that's pertinent globally, not just in the UK, is the way that the neurodivergence is medicalized and talked about in deficit terms, and that there's a lot of work on the social model of disability, which I know that you're very interested in, and how you flip the narrative and how you talk about even the language that you use matters. And it always you know sometimes when I see people write or talk about high functioning autism, and low functioning, you know years ago, had I been diagnosed years ago under the classification as it was then, I would have been diagnosed as Asperger's, and high functioning, um, and gifted. These kinds of things. I excelled academically, um, and sometimes those labels are then used in a way to sort of minimalize the support, because yes, academically excelled, and both of my children accept, but the challenges were there, and had the challenges been recognised and diagnosed and the support in place, who knows what could have been achieved at particular times. And I think that's why a lot of late diagnosed people struggle with their identity and go through that grief cycle, because you can sort of then think, well, had I known this, I might have done that, and life might have turned out completely differently. So you're almost grieving for the person that you could have been. If that makes
Mm.
sense.
No, that absolutely makes sense. And I think that sometimes, like in New York, for example, unfortunately, we just got like the whole MAID system, like they have in Canada, is being approved through New York State. And if folks aren't aware of what MAID is basically assisted suicide for anyone with any kind of disability who they say, oh, you're terminal. But the way the definitions are is it's basically like if you got the care that you needed, if you got the medication that you needed, if you got like supportive housing that you needed, if you had like a safe environment, you wouldn't need the MAID. But because we don't get the care that we need, the MAID is being instituted. And I know for myself years ago, I would have absolutely qualified for that. I would have qualified as someone who was, in a quote terminal state because my lupus continually kept flaring and I was in and
Yeah,
out of the hospital a lot and they didn't know what to do for me. And that would have been offered to me. But now I'm in a better place because I have the supports. I have a system around. I have better doctors. I have, a stable home. So it's like, when we think about some of these supports and some of the ways in which we don't support people or the ways in which we villainize folks. I'm trying to get our local elected officials to stop demonizing mental health and
yeah,
neurodivergence. They have in city council they have these committees and they just finally separated disability from alcohol and mental health. But what I really wish they did was put disability and mental health in one bucket and put
yeah.
the alcoholism in a different and they didn't do that. And it's because of the stigma associated with it. And hopefully eventually they'll stop doing that. But it's taken so long to get people to stop, villainizing and demonizing certain disabilities. And I think it goes back to
Absolutely.
having folks like myself
It,
and
it
like you to humanize it. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you make that comparison, because I've certainly noticed a pattern here in the UK. We've seen, as most countries have seen over the last few years, a huge surge in people moving forward, particularly later adults asking for diagnosis. And we have at the moment issues with waiting lists for assessment, diagnostic assessments. Even when you have the diagnostic assessment, if you've got ADHD, there's often a wait for medication. There's shortages of medication and things like that. And it's interesting because autism, as is ADHD, dyspraxia, lots of other, well, all, in fact, I think it's all neurodivergent conditions. You could, from before 2013, you could only be diagnosed as autistic or ADHD. But now it's widely recognized that the more often the norm is to have co-occurring different aspects, and like my kids, and even when I had my own diagnosis back in August 2024, it was a single diagnosis for autism, but the psychologist said, however, you might want to explore an assessment around ADHD and dyspraxia because you have very strong traits in them, and because your children, you're highly likely to have those as well. And I decided not to go down that route, because for me it was more about really understanding what my challenges were, and looking for the solutions rather than getting another label. And yeah, that was really interesting. But there's much more of a almost a stigma attached to being autistic, and it is almost vilified, particularly in the press. And I think it links back to a lot of media stereotypes about what autism is. Um, it's romanticized in movies and things like that. You're either a Rain Man character or you're Forrest Gump, or do you know what I mean? And it's not great, the way that people sort of think. And I remember shortly after my diagnosis, somebody said to us, "So what's it like to be autistic?" And I went, "Well, I don't know. I don't know what it's not like to be not, because I've always been this." And I kind of used the analogy to explain. It's almost like I can put my shoes on the wrong feet and walk in my shoes on the wrong feet for quite some time, but it'll hurt, and they'll pinch, and they'll cause me to have sores on my feet, but I can still do it, and it's like that's how you navigate life, and as an autistic person, you find ways to get around it, and it's painful at times, and it's challenging at times. It's almost like the whole world's got an IKEA flat pack and the instructions, but you haven't, and you've still got to build a flat pack at the same time, and everybody else knows what the rules are. You don't. It's just crazy. So that leads to a lot of people looking for different ways to do things, and that's what drives people to mask as well, and contributes to things like the mental health. And my mental health over the years has taken some hits, and not understanding why I would feel so low, and that sort of anxiousness and anxiety is simply because my nervous system's stuck in fight and flight mode all the time, and that ultimately led to my burnout situation. It's not the first time that I've burnt out. At 21, I was um, I was off work for 8 weeks and diagnosed as having chronic fatigue syndrome, and that's obviously been misdiagnosed. I had postnatal depression after both my pregnancies, and they were obviously misdiagnosed as well. I was hospitalised where um, it was thought that I had a cluster migraine in 2019. Actually, it's autistic meltdown or shutdown, and basically pushing through the last 6 years of personal challenges, COVID, and so on and so forth. My body and my brain just stopped in June 2025 and just wouldn't allow me to go any further. But that's helped me to reevaluate and to learn what works best for me and my nervous system. So although it was painful at the time, I think it's important to learn from that for me, and if I can help other people to avoid that, particularly people that I know and love, then I can, I can feel very proud of myself if I can help people to navigate through those challenges. And that's kind of where I want to go with my professional direction as well. Um, Being somebody who's always been in public service, it's really important for me to work with the community and add social impact. And I'm doing some work alongside the work that I'm doing around accelerate inclusion with some friends. And we're going to be setting up a community interest company called the Ubertori Collective. And that's specifically going to be about supporting neurodivergent adults who are either diagnosed or undiagnosed to navigate the transitions into employment, whether that's paid employment or entrepreneurship, and also how to do it to protect their well-being at the same time, because so many people are in environments that really aren't right for them. And when I think about inclusion, I often reflect on growing up. In a former coal mining town in the northeast of England, I was the daughter of a coal miner, and canaries were once used in mines to detect toxic gases. They were the early warning systems to prevent disaster. And that imagery really resonates because in workplaces today, neurodivergent people often act like those canaries. They highlight where the systems are rigid, that they're unsafe or exclusionary, not because there's anything wrong with them as the canary, but because the environment hasn't been designed to accommodate the difference. And Ludmila Praslov's work, Canary Code, you may or you may not be familiar with that, has really influenced me deeply. She writes about designing workplaces to detect risk early and prevent harm, and that really resonates and aligns perfectly with my approach to neuroinclusion, about being proactive, looking at the structures and making sure that they're human-centered.
I really love that you brought that up because that just shows just how, like, on one hand, like, yes, offices have their certain cultures and certain things that they're doing, but they can absolutely, like, a lot of the things that we're doing to people, it's a choice. We're choosing to do it this way. And so I love that you guys are setting up ways to support people in the workplaces. I've also been a canary for a lot of organizations who had never hired someone with a physical disability, had never hired anyone with a chronic illness. And so I was their tester, and I really don't like that. I don't like being the I mean, I don't mind being a shiny object, but I don't mind going into an organization where I'm the shiny new object, and then I'm the only one with a disability, and then suddenly I have to, like, figure out what I can get and what I can't get, what's going to be accessible, what's not going to be accessible, and then holding their feet to the fire because they are the employer. I've been
Yeah.
through that so many times. So I really appreciate that you're actually supporting people to, hold on to some of these positions, and also hold their employers accountable, because I think that's vitally important.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's interesting because I've always been drawn to social injustice, and it's a trait that many autistic people and many neurodivergent people do, because I think because they see, the experience, things that aren't right, all the way through their lives. They want to do something to make things better. And even before my diagnosis, you know, every office, every organisation, whether it's in the public service, the private sector, or the community sector, I've come across challenges, and there have been people who didn't appreciate my honesty, my candor, my ability to spot things that weren't right, where systems were ineffective, and damaging to both the business and the individuals. But there was always the opposite as well, because for although there were people who didn't appreciate it and didn't understand it, there were those who recognized that, well, actually, those are strengths, and those traits, which I now know to be my neurodivergent traits, are what helped me to succeed and thrive, and move into leadership positions quite early on in my career. So I was doing the things, to champion, inequality from a very, very early age, and yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and it kind of validates as well for the way I felt about things. That this is who I am. I'm not going to shrink away from being who I am. And those organisations that celebrate, recognise, and embrace differences just truly do make a difference. And those who use equality and diversity initiatives, almost like as an initiative, as a project, tend to be the ones where it's just a tick box exercise. It's formative inclusion, and it's usually to tick a box to demonstrate to funding commissioners that they meet the legal obligations. But actually, when you scratch beneath the surface, there's quite a lot of things that you probably wouldn't want to be known out there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and, like, I sometimes it just boggles my mind that there are people who simply want to tick boxes just to say they're doing something while not doing something all at the same time. And I've encountered people like that, and, like, they just want the funds, they just want the accolades, but they're not actually helping or supporting anybody and
Yeah.
wasting funds in that case. It could go to somebody else. Why are you doing that? That's wild. And it also reminds me, I read this article yesterday about how the majority of people in the world who have autoimmune disorders or a lot of they said neurodivergent issues, but I don't think it's necessarily an issue. That's back to language. But they said the majority of them are women, and that the majority of us who have, whether it's autoimmune disorders or any of those illnesses, or even like neurodivergence, who are women, we have those things because of some of the traumas we went through. And it just sort of blew my mind when I was reading this article, because I was like, okay, well, I've gone through trauma. I've got an autoimmune disorder. I've been told that I do speak sometimes neurodivergently, even though I've not gotten a diagnosis. And I usually attribute it to my lupus brain fogs as to why I'm having issues, but maybe it's not all of that. And so, what are your thoughts on the connections, not only because you speak on systems and about some of the oppressions within the systems and how we're just sort of like stuck in that, and some people do it on purpose and some people don't, like what are your opinions, whether it's from a personal experience or when dealing with people, on the systems that are in place that cause the trauma, which then cause these conditions, which then cause us to need care that isn't always easy to get, and then we're in this continual cycle of,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think, looking at from a both a personal perspective and professional perspective, discrimination is often subtle. It's often overlooked and it's often normalized, and over time that can erode confidence for the individual, but it also, for me, it sharpened my understanding that exclusion usually is structural, not just individual. In a lot of cases, most people don't set out to be um, discriminatory. It's usually ill-informed intentions or good intentions gone wrong, inappropriate use of language, not understanding different health conditions and their impact, and their inability to detect that risk early. That's what prevents the harm, and that's why I do what I do, to really align that with my approach to neuro inclusion. I strongly believe in the approach that Ludmila Praslova talks about, where if you look at systems through that neurodivergence lens, um, you can you can see the things that you see, the patterns. For me, my neurodivergence profile, I'm very highly sensitive to light, sounds, smells, so sensory overwhelm and emotional dysregulation are really something that impacts on me. And when I get really, really dysregulated, I become very emotional, and emotion is a big no in the workplace in the UK. I'm sure it's the same in the US and globally as well. But when you have leaders who um, are vulnerable and put their heart on the sleeve, not everybody appreciates that. And until we have more leaders willing to put the head above the parapet and talk about the personal challenges, things around mental health, health conditions, then things won't change. A good friend of mine who runs a national awarding body here in the UK, put a very personal post on LinkedIn explaining he's got cancer a few weeks ago. And that took tremendous bravery to actually say, look, I'm vulnerable, and this is what I'm going through, and this is why you haven't heard from me for so long. And I think that's just absolutely amazing. And those leaders who, if people think that some of the leaders, even politically, have never had challenges, well, you're just kidding yourself, aren't you? Because everybody goes through life with challenges. There's no individual has the perfect life, but being able to deal with those, navigate them, and learn from them, and go on and still do what you do and still love what you do is a huge strength. However, there's still so much stigma attached to it. And going back to the diagnosis type of thing, I first came out with, I'm autistic, but very, very quickly, but I'm also ADHD, almost like I had this um or my own sort of negative perception of internal ableism. So being or ADHD's better than being autistic. And when I was going through the process before I had the diagnosis, I'd actually had quite a serious health scare back in 2022, and without going into too much detail, I had a procedure. I ended up having sepsis, septic shock, and went into hospital, and I had a heart attack while I was in hospital. And that was very life changing because I was unresponsive for 2 minutes, so I'd gone. And for some reason, that urge to come back. It's not like the light at the end of the tunnel that a lot of people talk about, but for me, I thought I was awake for the whole of the thing. There's 30 people running around with all machines and things like that, and all I'm doing is looking up at the ceiling, saying, I'm not going to leave those kids. I'm not going to leave those kids. And then a lovely nurse appeared by my side, and there was this waft of perfume that smelt like my late mother's perfume, and I just snapped out of it, and then I was back, and that I realized then that I needed to do something from a health perspective, because at that time, at the 2022, coming out of COVID, like a lot of people, have been inactive. I put a lot of weight on. I'd lost both my parents through the COVID pandemic, within 4 months of each other. So my physical health was quite poor. Then having a heart attack on top of that, I needed to do something. So eventually, despite trying all of the diets and things like that, because I know how to eat healthy. I used to work for Weight Watchers years ago. I was still stuck in a cycle. So I had bariatric surgery, and I went off to Turkey and did that on an impulse, by myself, and had that, and it was the most transformative thing that I've ever done, and probably the one thing I've always just done for myself, and I felt very selfish going off and doing it. But I lost 12 stone after the bariatric surgery, and within about 3 months of having that surgery, that's when all of the sensory issues started to appear, and whether it was because things like my diabetes had been resolved, and I come off the medication for that. I know I didn't have issues with the sleep apnea that I had, in the same way that I'd had previously. So I came off the medication for that. Whether it was coming off the medication or whether the operation taking 80% of my stomach away, disrupting my nervous system. The vagus nerve obviously runs through the stomach, whether that had it, but the sensory overwhelm just started to flood. And I thought that I had something quite serious in terms of like MS or something like that, because I was falling over and my balance was off. It was a very, very strange time. Gone from being the designated driver on nights out, because I don't drink a lot of alcohol, but and enjoying nighttime driving, to absolutely totally anxious. Huge halos of light around street lamps and car lights, and that was then triggering that anxiety feeling and the chest pounding, and it was surreal. And then flipping that into the work environment, and a lot of the offices that I worked in at the time and throughout my career have been open office environments. So lots of people talking at the same time, telephones ringing, air conditioning units going on, windows open, and hearing traffic. I was experiencing all of those senses all at the same time, and getting through the day and doing my job. My performance never dipped, but by the time I'd get home, I'd be asleep by 6:30, or I'd actually fall asleep sitting up. And weekends were just literally non-existent in 2023, 2024, because I was just so exhausted, which obviously was another driver to try and understand health-wise what was going on. So yeah, some interesting things there, and I'm sure I've gone off tangent from what you asked us originally.
No, no, no. I feel like that was incredibly amazing because again, it shows us how dynamic our experiences as disabled folks are, but also like within your diagnosis, with working in different systems, with trying to figure out how your body is functioning, and also like I'm also part of the heart attack club, and I had two heart attacks when I was 17. Nobody believed me. Nobody thought I was. They thought I was making it up. The doctor in the ER was like, "Oh, were you having sex? Were you doing something that you weren't supposed to be?" They tried to blame me while I was having chest pains. And what it was is my lupus was just flipping out. It was really flaring up in a wild way. But also, I love that you mentioned the vagus nerve because I've been looking into that a lot. I did this intensive therapy last year because I also had a very severe burnout and I had to just stop everything. I was like, okay, you guys, if I don't stop everything now, I might just walk into traffic in a couple months. So I need to stop now and work on this now. And through the therapy, I rediscovered all the traumas that I just buried deep inside of me
Yeah,
that were causing issues with my gut and causing issues with my entire immune system and nervous system. And so I encourage all of you guys to look up the vagus nerve and figure out if that's one of the reasons, because it very well might be. Autoimmune disorders are very much connected to the gut, and the gut is connected to the vagus system, and the whole body's
absolutely.
connected. Yeah, so
It
check that out.
definitely, I would highly recommend anybody who has any inkling that there's something not quite right. Whether that's an autoimmune system, neurological. When I had the burnout and shut down, for the first month, it was a complete cognitive shutdown. Couldn't get out of bed, couldn't do anything, or if I could get out of bed, it would be to lie on the sofa and watch TV. Just couldn't do anything meaningful. And then a friend of mine said, "Why don't you try yoga?" Um, and I started to feel a little bit more energetic towards the end of July last year. And so I went off and joined a local yoga studio. And I don't do things by half. I throw myself into all sorts of things. And the studio had Reiki, somatic healing, meditation. sound baths, gong baths, all sorts of things, hypnotherapy. And I literally did everything. And within probably about 8 weeks, it was transformational. Now, I don't know whether what it is, whether it was the yoga, whether it was doing breath work, whether it was doing the Reiki, or whether it was a combination of all of those things. I know that those practices made a massive difference to me, and that's why I'm looking from the social impact perspective, and why the work that I'm doing to look at the Ubertori aspect, because Ubertori is the Japanese philosophy that everybody blossoms in their own way. And my two friends, one's the yoga the person who owns the yoga studio, who's also neurodivergent, and as I said, my other friend is someone who's interested in works in helping entrepreneurship. And I think if you can help people to regulate, to understand what it is that's dysregulating yourself, you can uncover a lot. And I did a lot of work at the same time, looking at polyvagal theory and ad- adverse childhood experiences, and the work that trauma expert Gabor Mate has looked into, and that stored trauma in the nervous system. As you said, that trauma on top of like other things. It's interesting because I attended a seminar, and they talked about how the body stores trauma. So they were talking about mainly PTSD, and the trauma response and anxiety response, and then they talked about the way that ADHD brains have similar sort of responses to somebody who's experienced trauma, and then they start to talk about autistic brains, how they. And then I just put my hand up. I said, "Well, what if you've had all four?" So and a lot of people who've had chronic health challenges have experienced the trauma, whether it's through the health challenges that they've had, or other experiences, and they have been stuck in fight or flight, and that is why you see so many people burn out in adulthood, because the environments and the systems around them aren't there to support effectively enough.
That is so accurate and so true. And I'm so glad that you raised your hand and was like, what if we've experienced all these things? Because there's so many people who have all these things going on all at the same time, and they still have to get up and go to work or go to school or take care of their kids and function in the world. And I think oftentimes I think we had a little, just it was like a momentary shift in our thinking in the height of COVID, where we paused for just a second, and people were actually able to just like recollect themselves just a little bit, like working from home and being more with their family and all that. And then we just went right back into being out and about and going full speed ahead, 1,000 miles an hour, forgetting that that rest was actually good for us. And also forgetting, I'm gonna go on a whole nother side comment for a second, that I pay attention to environmental and climate things as well as it pertains to like disabled folks, since when something goes down in our climate, it affects us first. And our pollution actually got so much better in terms of our environmental dangers. Like our air was clearer, our water was cleaner,
Yeah,
because there were less people out for several months. And so that
yeah,
just makes me think about, like, not only are our bodies in need of that kind of rest, but our environment, our water, our air, our everything on this earth is very much in need of that quote rest from human beings. Because if we
absolutely.
keep on pushing, what earth are we going to have? And if we keep on pushing, what body are we going to have? So I really appreciate you
Absolutely.
bringing those points up. Um, so we just went on a tangent. That's okay. I love it so much. So I just want to go back to the so what brings you the most disabled joy?
Mm, definitely my children, and seeing sort of them thrive. I put a post on LinkedIn before Christmas, and it was around autistic joy, and how how I had been repairing my tumble dryer with my son, and I learned how to do that from YouTube years ago, and I've been able to keep my tumble dryer going long past that many people. And the first time I remember doing it, it took hours and hours and hours, lots of frustration, almost crying at the frustration of not being able to do it. And literally, because my son was helping and we worked together as a team and we knew how to do it, we literally fixed the tumble dryer for £9 English pounds, instead of having to spend another £300 on a brand new machine. And just working together, doing that, it was just a joyful moment, and just little things like that. I do some volunteering at a local organisation called Sunderland Recovery College, which I've done lots of courses as an attendee to understand how to manage anxiety, and we've been doing aromatherapy, natural therapies, and like me, I like to know everything about it. So I buy my own kit, and it comes, and there's 32 essential oils. None of them are in alphabetical order, so I have to put them in alphabetical order to get the order right in my head, and and did that. And then I opened this box with all the pipettes and the little tools, and this little plastic thing, and I'm thinking, what on earth's that? So I took a picture of it and put it into AI and said, "What's this?" And it was actually a bottle opener, and it was to open like the fiddly things on the tops of tubes of essential oils that can, for people who've got dyspraxia, can find really difficult with the fine motor skills, having challenges with that. And so I was just like, "Oh my goodness!" This little kit that I got off Amazon for 9.99 has something that helps somebody with disability, and I was just, yes, I'm going to tell people about it. So I posted about my aromatherapy journey for half a day. It was just brilliant. I just spent such a relaxing afternoon mixing little pipettes and playing scientists with me aromatherapy oils, and just totally relaxing and bringing joy personally to myself. And I just had to share it.
I love that little bit of joy. And I also love aromatherapy stuff. And I'm always saging our apartment and, bringing those beautiful smells and all that. That reminds me, I need to get some more oil. So that's awesome. I love that so much. Um, so how do you spoke on this a bit earlier, but I just wanted to ask it again, like how do you hold on to peace in this world, especially as the world becomes more and more of a dumpster fire, which is, just the way it is. Like, how do you hold on to your peace?
Well, for me, peace comes through deliberate practices that protect my nervous system. So things like meditation and mindfulness, I practice them daily. I love going to the sound baths, the drumming sessions, the gong sessions. And I've learned over the years that I really can only influence so much. So I focus on things that I can influence, that act in alignment with my values, rather than trying to fix everything. Because that's what a lot of neurodivergent people do, is try. It's almost like trying to compensate for being different, to prove that you're good enough, that you don't say no to anything, and you'll always be the first to volunteer, put your hand up, and that contributes to that cycle of running on the hamster wheel all the time and never getting off and never slowing down. So focusing on and acting in alignment with my values rather than trying to fix everything and everyone.
I love that so much, and I love how you were talking about disrupting some of the issues to so that you stay in line with that and being very intentional. I think sometimes folks think, "Oh gosh, I have no power, I have no control," but you do have some power, you do have some control, especially over some of the things that are going on with your body. And so, yeah, y'all, get your meditation on, get your yoga on, start doing doing some research into things that are going to make you feel a little better. YouTube is your friend. Like, you don't have to go to YouTube University down a rabbit hole. You can watch some meditation videos.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's some amazing free resources on YouTube. I do yoga nidra, and when people think that I'm doing yoga nidra, it's yoga, and that's the breath work. And I do that morning and evening. That's part of my daily routine now to make sure that I regulate. And if I'm going to somewhere where I think that is going to um, be busy and maybe overstimulating, I'll practice my breathing exercises and do a little bit of meditation, and that helps me feel more calm and grounded. I still get stressed, everybody does, but I'm much better at regulating that now, and that's what what's important to me. And hopefully, over time, I'll get both my kids into yoga as well. My daughter comes. My son quite hasn't managed to come across, but yeah, I would highly recommend looking at it. It's about trying to find out what's best for individuals, and you know, trying not to do everything, because no, if you try to do everything yourself all the time, you end up being the ones in the organisations that are the reliable ones, and you end up being the person that gets stuff dumped on them, and eventually you come to resent that because line managers, bosses know that you're going to pick up the slack where there are other people who are on the same salaries and things like that. They're just doing what they're paid to do, whereas other people are doing all this added value stuff because they can't say no because they're trying to demonstrate, but they're burning themselves out in the process of doing it. Um, there's no one person, there's no one organization can do everything to fix some of the challenges that we have in this world. And it's only when we collaborate and we work together and we use tools right. Well, we use the systems, we design systems to meet people's strengths, that we can really make a difference.
I so agree with that. And I wish more folks looked at where people's strengths are rather than trying to trying to fit like someone who's like shaped like an octagon into a square. And it's just like, wait a minute, but that's not my shape even a little bit. What are you doing? But also I love
Absolutely.
how you started off with saying like don't do all the things, just but try some things sometimes. Like, if it's okay if you've never meditated or done yoga or done breath work, but just try it and see if it even works for you, because you never know. Like, my husband had never done yoga or meditation in his life until he met me, and then once he met me he was like, "Oh, I actually like this, let's do this together." And I was like, "See, you're welcome." He's like, "I never thought I'd be into," he says this woo woo stuff. He's a very he's a sailor. He's a, he was on ships all the time doing technical things. And he was like, I never did all this woo woo stuff. And I'm like, well, you're going to do it now because we're doing it. And there you go. You're welcome. But he's much
I
calmer
love it.
now. And yeah, and so you never know what's going to happen when you're going to try something that you've never done before. So you guys just check it out, see what's up. And if you want some help with that, I got you. I'll help you out. I got some really great videos that would be wonderful for you for guided meditations and guided yoga and very even chair yoga and chair meditation. Like you don't have to do
Yeah.
acrobatic moves. Like this is for everybody and everybody, like straight up. And so we want it to be inclusive for all of you. Um, so the last thing I'm going to ask is what what is the one thing that you would change about the world and why?
I think that's a great question. I think how one thing I would change is about how we measure success as a society. Current approaches, metrics are all structured. It doesn't matter what sector it is. It's all about speed. It's all about visibility and output. And that in itself excludes so many people and burns others out. And if you flip that narrative and focus on value and sustainability, depth, and long-term contribution, that creates healthier workplaces and better outcomes, and everybody thrives. And that's really what I would change.
I love that so much. I feel very much the same way. Like I wish we would measure people based on like their talents, their like what the energy they bring into the world, rather than how many numbers are you entering into the Excel. Did you do all this? Did you work your 40 hours? Like what I'm not a machine. You are not a machine. And so I love how you spoke on that. That is so beautiful. Okay, and so the last question is there anything else that you want to share with the audience about yourself, about your work, about anything?
I think really it's about just just really thinking about in terms of specific insights around the inclusion agenda. Inclusion really is structural. It's not symbolic. It isn't. To me, it's not a slogan. It's not a one-off project. It's about embedding practices, policies, structures, and allow everybody to contribute fully. Superficial gestures are just performative, and real inclusion can change how decisions are made, how work's assigned, and how people are supported on a day-to-day basis. And how leaders embody that and set the tone really can shape the culture through the way that they reward inclusive behaviour, listening to different perspectives. I kind of like to put that into an analogy. I like to use analogies. Inclusion is it- it's like diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion's being asked to the dance. And not just that, it's about having a say where the venue is, the music that's being played, the food that's served. Representation alone isn't enough. True inclusion means shaping the environment so everyone can participate fully and feel that they belong, because everybody, no matter who they are, has some contributions.
That was so beautiful. Andrea, it was such a joy to speak with you today. This was so I listen, you guys. I hope you got as many gems from this conversation as I did. And also just the reminders to like be kind to yourself and not just your body, not just your immune system, but also your mind. Like beyond that, like be kind to the whole package because the whole package functions together. And as we have seen, all the nerves, all the body parts, all the internal organs, all the everything, it's all very connected along with your mind. And so be kind to yourself, very much so. So thank you, Andrea, so much for joining us. This was such a
You're
delightful conversation.
welcome. Thank you,
And
Iman.
Thank
It's
you.
been a pleasure. It really has. Discussing inclusion and neurodivergence, which you can tell are a special to me, a passion of mine, and how we can create workplaces in society where everyone's strengths are valued are so important. So thank you so much for inviting me to talk today.
Of course. All right. I will see y'all later. Bye, y'all.
Brilliant. Thank you.